explain to me here. Are you saying that you do, even if I grant that? Okay, so you're saying that you do think that a fetus is a baby or a human life?
I'm willing to grant it, yes.
Okay. Are you? Am I black? You're blacked out on my screen right now. I don't know if you can.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, whatever. You were there for a second. I don't know if it's like just lagging up for a sec or. Okay. All right. Well, I'm confused. Why? Explain to me why you think that like it doesn't matter if you're willing to grant that it is a baby or human life.
Because I think fetuses have a lesser value than non-fetuses, and thus I have no real moral concerns with terminating them. I would also say that my position on abortion limits generally to the first trimester for generally arbitrary reasons. Anything beyond the first trimester is dubious, and I generally oppose abortions performed in the third trimester.
Okay. Yeah, no, we agree that third is honestly disgusting. So here's my whole thing with you as far as like what you just said to me. So I'm gonna key on mostly like the first part of what you said. Right. So you said that you don't regard a fetus as being equal to a non-fetus, like something along those lines.
Pretty much.
Okay. So by granting that a fetus is a baby in a human life, I don't understand how you can still say that.
Oh, I think so. Okay.
Because by saying that it's a baby or a human life, then that means it is equal to a non-fetus. Like, I feel like that's contradicting what you're going into the argument saying.
No, I can think that it's a human life. I can just think that it's a human life that has very little value. I consider human sort of a continuum, a spectrum, and they're on the lower end of the spectrum, and they don't really possess any value. They don't have any. I mean, they're just sort of worthless, and so if you want to, I have no problem doing that.
Okay, so
it's a life that I'm comfortable with disposing.
I mean, I think. So you're arguing that not all human lives are equal.
Basically.
So you know that like throughout history that has been continuously debunked, and that's been like one of the by that same logic.
I don't know that it's ever empirically been debunked. I don't know if I don't recall there ever being empirical studies that determine that human lives are equal. I mean, I don't think they are.
There's no studies about it, but like especially in the U.S. amongst other countries, that same argument was made for slavery, and like we have amendments that don't allow that anymore.
Right now, I generally agree with most of those things. My only point is that it's specifically for fetuses. Even though I guess I would say that some lives, in terms of matter and value, not necessarily in terms of value for human lives, in terms of how much their lives matter in the grand scheme of things, I think some matter, some don't, and fetuses really don't.
I mean, you understand at one point you were a fetus too, right?
Yeah. I'm not saying that everyone who gets pregnant should go and have an abortion. I'm saying I think the option should be available as a last-ditch effort at birth control, and as a way of ignoring the typical, sidestepping the typical argument given, saying, "Oh, isn't it murder?" Sure, it's murder, but if I grant that, it's also murder. Then that I would be perfectly fine with carrying out.
I mean, we're not going to debate.
It's a sidestep around. I'm not really arguing. I mean, it's basically recognizing the pro-life side generally has the benefits, which I do think they do. It's just a way of sort of skirt the argument to the point where they have no answer other than to just accept it by saying that fetuses don't matter as entities, and thus, if you follow that logic, you don't think that all lives matter, if you don't think that fetuses have intrinsic value, then you are basically, then the next conclusion is, well, then there's no problem with doing it.
All right, here's my opinion on this thing. I believe that abortion, whether or not that should be legal in the United States, should be left up to the individual states, because whether or not you consider, I believe that all human lives are equal no matter what. I think that's been proven. I think that's a constitutional amendment. And so, like, I just think that you cannot say that one human being's life is not equal to somebody else's. And so therefore, like, the federal government has, and see, then what this hinges on, though, is whether or not you believe that a fetus is a baby and a human life, like you're saying. So some people, if you don't believe that, then whether or not the federal government accepts that or not is discriminating on your opinion. And so I can say that I do not believe it should be any sort of amendment ever, because to be able to say that it is a human life, that it is a baby, and therefore needs to be compared to other human lives or human beings, is that is hinging on opinion. Therefore, the federal government has no, like, it shouldn't be involved. It should be left up to the states whether or not that should be legal.
Okay, I actually agree with you on that point. And this sort of goes back to the whole murder thing. Like, oh, okay, well then it's murder. I mean, most murders are done by state governments.
Well, see, but
there's no real, obviously, like federal is some punishment stuff, but generally murder cases are tried at the state level. So if someone murders somebody, they're going to be tried by the state of, okay, so I live in Kansas, so they'd be tried by the state of Kansas. So I agree that abortion, if it's murder, then by that standard, it should be rated back to the states via the 10th Amendment.
My thing is, like, I'm not saying how it should be tried or not based on that. What I'm saying is, like, okay, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that you don't actually believe that, like, a fetus is a baby or a human life, right? Or, like, maybe you're confused about it, you're not certain.
I guess I would say in general, I would say no, but I would grant it for most conversations, and even then I would say I don't care.
Okay, so if in general you don't believe it, right? So I think that for an abortion to be murder, I think you have to accept completely and entirely, everyone has to accept that a fetus is a baby and a human life.
Okay.
I think for that to be able to happen. But the problem is, well, maybe it's not a problem depending on how you see it, but the thing is, not everybody sees it like that.
Right. Sure.
If that makes sense.
Sure.
And so therefore, if the federal government was to make a ruling on it, whether it should be an amendment or it shouldn't be an amendment, that would be discrimination of opinion, because some people believe it and others don't. And it's not the federal government's job to decide whose opinion is right. That's why I'm saying it needs to be left to the states, not because of how murder law is interpreted.
No, I mean, that was just in the sense that I think it's no direct thing about abortion in the Constitution by the 10th Amendment that has to be a power that gets relegated to the states.
Well, but also the big part of that is, I think the reason that it's not in the Constitution in the first place is because at that time period, I mean, abortion
there was
happened,
no right,
yes,
right,
but it's not nearly on as large a scale as now. And yeah, you're right, women didn't have nearly as many rights as today.
Australia, what's the Constitution?
He's not from Australia. I know him.
Google it. Okay. No. Okay, so yeah, basically what you're saying is that people refer to murder, you have to view it as a baby or a human of some sort.
Yes.
And don't. And this is where I sort of.
This is where you fall.
It's more strategy for me taking this position than it is anything else, in the sense that if I don't consider it to be a human life, then there's no conflict in whether I'm able to be aborted. If I do, then my fallback is I don't care. And then I do that by devaluing the worth of a fetus to the point where during the first trimester, its intrinsic value is near zero, and I simply don't care if they kill it or not. It dies so bad, too bad.
I mean, okay, so here's my vibe on that. So if you're willing to grant that it is a baby or a human life, human lives are supposed to be compared, like all of them are at the same level. If that wasn't true, then I hate to like be redundant, but I'm going to fall back on, like, if that wasn't true, then slaves would still exist, because then some people wouldn't be equal to other people. And like, if that wasn't true, then I could be like, hey, my neighbor over in the other room, I don't think he's worth this to me, so I'm gonna go over and murder him. You know what I mean? That clearly is wrong. You know, like I can't say or do that, because human lives are all equal.
Except, well, and again, this is where it's a fallback in the sense that I would then say, no,
because saying that a fetus is a baby or a human life, and you're saying that have not
been born yet. That's the difference. I mean, like obviously, like African Americans who were slaves, also the Irish were slaves for a period of time, but people don't want to talk about that.
Everybody's been enslaved at some point. Every race, really.
White slaves at one point, and they were the Irish. But yes, yeah. Anyway, they were already born. They were already. I mean, and that's why I do sort of make the distinction. There's a difference between someone who is, 25 years old or whatever, who was brought in as a slave against versus something that is essentially a blob, if you will. And I think that there's just, you can't say that one is worth, that the latter is worth more. I mean, it's just.
I don't think it's worth more. I think they're equal.
I would
and
say,
also
I would
by
say
not by
the,
saying
the person
by instead of literally what you did right there, and I caught this. So this was interesting. By switching from somebody to something, you aren't referring to it as a baby or a human life. You're viewing it as something lesser than that. You know what I mean? Like your argument, You started off by saying that it is a baby or a human life and that you're granting that. But then when you actually argue about it, you go, oh, wait, it's not, because it's not equal. So you're saying that you believe it, but you're telling me that you don't believe it.
I think my position, just I don't necessarily regard a first trimester fetus to be a human life. But if I were to grant you that premise, I still would not change my position, because I view a fetus, I'm not applying it to anything that's been born, which would be how I would get around the slavery thing, because they've already been born, they're already grown up, whatever. The fetus has not. That's worth less, and I don't really have a problem with killing it. You are damn okay. Actually, no, Hillary supported killing babies that if the abortion failed and the baby was born anyways. That's what Hillary was talking about. I do not support that. I already said earlier in this thing that I oppose third trimester abortions. So M Jessup 110.
He's just fucking around.
Eat a dick.
He's joking. It's not real. I know him in real life. He's just being a dick.
Feed me.
What the heck? Oh. Give me 1 sec. I gotta go. Oh, never mind. Sorry. I have my phone on a charger, and I guess it wasn't on. My phone was about to die. But never mind. I'm good now. See, but because my thing is, I think that if you're saying that a first trimester fetus, by saying something is a baby or a human life, that means that you're admitting that a first trimester fetus is equal to like me or you or I, is however you or me, I think is what it is.
Okay.
I think that's what that means to me.
And so,
like,
and I guess
that's how I perceive that when you said that. Because when you said that, I was like, does that mean you're okay with just killing anyone? Like, that's why I invoked the debate.
No, it strictly applies to fetuses. And again, when I said earlier, it's completely arbitrary. It strictly applies to fetuses. And in that case, I still would have no problems with killing them. It would be a murder that I would have no problems with disposing of that life.
That just doesn't. I mean, that
I would limit it specifically to fetuses. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily hold that same standard in any other realm of human life. It's strictly to first trimester fetuses.
But the reason that you're saying that is because you don't. Yeah, exactly. It's because like what Meme Queen is saying. No, I'm fucking around. But like the reason that you can say that is because, despite the fact that you are quote granting it, like you don't really grant it. You know what I mean? Well, and it's like it's difficult and I feel like the reasoning behind this is because you don't actually believe what you're granting for the sake of the argument. So it's difficult for you to see the point of the people that actually do believe that. Like you're saying that for the sake of the argument, you're going to pretend to believe in that, but you don't actually know what it means. Like you don't understand what it means to really believe in that.
I guess, but I'm still saying even if I were convinced that it was a human life point, I would still not really care if it was human one way or the other. I would still support.
If you believe that it was a human life, then you would be accepting that it's equal to you and I.
Except I would even. I don't know if I would accept that necessarily.
But like that's what a human life is. That's what that means.
Then yeah, okay. If you want to,
like you and I,
if you want to push it, then yes, and then I would still say, and then I would make
then you would be admitting that murdering some people is okay.
Basically.
I can't agree with that. that just sounds bad, dude.
I mean, a lot of things sound bad, but I mean, it's, you know, like fetuses are just, they're just, you know, unfortunately they get the short end of the stick. And I'm not saying that everyone should just go out and get an abortion.
I'm just saying that, like, I can't.
The option should be there. How I would justify that option being available. And, you know, there are winners in the world, and I'm a winner. And fetuses are losers.
I mean, but what you're telling me is, okay, but based on your logic, okay, so let's say you're a winner and some people like fetuses are a loser. So I'm gonna go ahead and just say I'm a loser as well, according to that, I suppose. So let's say, for example, I could fall into the loser group, but based on your logic, it's okay to murder some people if you view them as being less than you. So if I viewed you as being less than me, according to your logic, it would be totally sound for me to just kill you. Like that's fucked.
I think, well, that we have laws against that kind of a thing. Again, I do.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. There are laws against like that. If you believe it to be human life and that it's equal to you, then according to law, you cannot kill it. That's the same reason that, like, okay, first off, I would never want to kill another. Well, I have no reason to kill another human being. You know what I mean? So like, and it's against the law. So like morally, I know that's a bad thing. So like, if you are admitting that a fetus is another life, human being, baby, whatever, then you're doing the exact same thing as what's against the law. So that's what the problem is, because once you actually do grant the fact that a fetus is at that level, then that is the same thing as like you and I. So you cannot kill that thing. So because if you don't accept that, then you are able to kill it. So that's what the argument is.
Well, I guess I'd rather want to phrase it that I shouldn't. I mean, can imply to when I could kill a fetus if I really, I mean, I could just like grab it in my hand.
Okay, I mean,
squeeze it to death.
Anything, I suppose.
I have the ability to. I think no. Basically, no. All I'm doing is simply usually is how it's. Because again, I think I said this before. I think pro-life people tend to have better arguments. Arguments are better, and they tend to back the pro-choice person into a corner in terms of trying to get them to accept murder. They don't want to do that, though, and they sort of try to get out of it, and it usually fails on most cases. I'm simply saying, yes, in that sense. The question is, so are you then ultimately you're okay with killing certain people? And you, I actually would say then in that case, yes, I think killing people is.
And I mean, like, I'm not trying to.
And I specifically limit it to fetuses. I specifically limit it to fetuses, and you'll say, oh, well, what's the objective standard for doing that? There is none. It is a total standard that I only apply that standard to fetuses. What it is. I'm very subjective about it. I recognize there's no moral anchor in my decision why I cut it off for first trimester fetuses. I just do, and anything that falls within that category, I have no problems with, and I think it's perfectly legitimate to murder it.
But like, all I'm saying is, I mean, I don't back people into corners based on stuff. Okay, I'm going to go through this at like multiple levels, what you just said to me, because you packed a lot into there. So like, first off, coming out the first one, I don't believe that like it's right for a conservative or any right-wing person to back a left-wing or liberal person into a corner based on things talking about, oh, well, you just like killing people. I don't believe in that. I believe that if you do not consider a fetus a human life, then abortion should theoretically be totally okay. I do consider it that, but I understand that not everybody thinks that way, and that's not how it is for everybody, and there's no way to prove somebody exactly right or exactly wrong. There's no studies out there that are proving stuff like that, and it hinges on opinion. And so therefore, laws can get iffy on stuff like that, and that's why it needs to be left up to states in the U.S. However, I believe that you cannot say that if you do believe that murdering them would not be the same as murdering any other human being, because you're saying that because of what the 17th Amendment tells us, that like all human lives have the same equal rights granted to them by the United States federal government and the Constitution. And so I suppose I see where you're coming from, and you're saying that you believe that some people should be able, some people, because you are granting that it is a person. You're saying that some people should be able to be murdered. But the problem is, once you admit that some people are able to be murdered, if that was to be brought into law, who decides when that stops happening? You know what I mean? Because, you know, first off, if something like that were to ever be passed into law, which I don't want to bash on you, but I think that the chances of that being passed into law based on those constraints, that's not the way.
No, it'll never happen.
But like, what would happen is then somebody comes along the line and takes it up to court and he says, you know what, this happened here, and if we take this down to the bare bones of it, then we can apply this in other situations. I really hate white suburban people, so let's go kill all of them because I view them as less valuable than us too. And then that law can just be transposed in different areas, because that's what happens in law. Like, court cases and stuff like that end up being moved around. And so like they get applied in different areas. Like, for example, a lot of people that were upset about like when the gay marriage thing got passed, it wasn't because gay people were allowed to marry gay people. That's like a human right. They should be able to do whatever the fuck they want to do. Okay. It was because the implications of that court case were to be able to be spread around different things, because what they were saying by that is that religions such as the big three monotheistic ones like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, those were wrong based on their definition of religion, which means the government is able to say that certain religions are wrong. See, because things aren't just as like simple as they seem like that. The law is able to be manipulated and twisted based on things that have been passed, like court cases and bills. So like, that's by saying that some people should be able to be killed, that leads to future opportunities in which that could be manipulated to saying that other groups of people should be allowed to be killed. And that's not a good thing.
Yeah, so that's a slippery slope. And I just, again, I mean, I specifically restrained to feet or benefit, as you acknowledge that this will never actually become law. So I would never actually have a court of law or anything, which is why I'm very comfortable in doing it in the home, and knowing that it'll never actually happen, so I don't have to actually deal with the real consequences of it.
Well, but like,
so
if you don't think it's going to happen, then why do you want it? Why not just like work towards something? Because if you work towards the goal of saying like, we need to convince everyone that a fetus isn't a human life, that's a much more obtainable goal for you.
Oh, well, what's the fun? Oh, that's boring. No. So, I just
that's something you could actually do to win. Why would you not?
I mean,
you said you're a winner.
But to the point about, what you said about there's no definitive, there's been no study, there's no it's mostly opinion in terms of this life thing. If that's the case, then wouldn't that make it a moot point that neither side could then claim supremacy over? If you're saying, well, is it alive or is it not? There's no study. It really comes down to
that's why I think it shouldn't be law. Because
so they throw it out as
nobody can be right and nobody can be wrong.
Entire point out about whether or not it's alive. That can be completely ignored. Then it's irrelevant because there's no definitive decision yet. So you can just throw it out.
Well,
so then it comes down to, and then it purely comes down to you're removing the whole life question. Then it just comes down to convenience and whether or not certain just rational things like don't always work. The pill doesn't work. So in those instances, shouldn't there be some sort of fail-safe for people who have wanted? Because then you're completely removing the whole life question out of it. And then it just comes down to, should this be a form of birth control if a condom breaks? And then in that case, and then once you've gotten rid of the life question, I would say, yeah, condoms break. They don't always. The pill doesn't always work. Your option.
Okay, I agree that birth control isn't a 100% effective thing. So what I'm gonna say is, just because we cannot come to a firm conclusion on whether or not it's a life or not, doesn't mean that that's irrelevant. You know what I mean? You can't just toss stuff out because you're like, oh, nobody really knows, so fuck it. Like that, I don't think that works.
If nobody really knows,
then we need to keep studying it and figure out the answer.
In circles, and you're preventing the actual issues that it pertains to. If you just get bogged down in this question of life, you're never actually reach a conclusion. No, the way that it's settled is just letting states vote on it individually. I mean, I generally agree, right? I'm arguing like in terms if it was like a vote or something like what the hell are they called?
Like it starts with an R. I can't think of it either. I blank on
it was like a referendum.
Yeah.
How would I vote? And someone asks you, how are you going to vote for this? And I would say, I would vote in favor of this. Here's why. If it would ever come to my state, and then if another state, I'm fine with that. That I don't.
That's your right as a citizen, yeah.
Right. But I mean, and if my state decided to vote against what I think, then that's fine. Then that's how they voted. Whatever.
Yeah, but the thing is, I can never convince you to vote my way, and you can't convince me to vote your way, because there's no
clearly.
Because the thing is, if it was so simple as to be able to debate and be like, yes, clearly fetuses are not human life, or yes, clearly fetuses are human life, humans would have decided that so much fucking longer ago. We wouldn't even have to talk about this. You know what I mean? It's not like just a clear cut, either it's A or it's B answer. People believe both things based on their perspectives about life.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, therefore, we cannot come to a definitive answer, and I'm not going to be able to convince you, and you're probably not going to be able to convince me. So, like, it's just talking about it that helps, and bringing it out into the public so that more people can think about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, I mean, I guess it ultimately does come down to, like you stated, like, do I think that am I then placing the value of certain humans over others? And if you look at it from that perspective, then yes, I am, and I'm putting at the very lowest.
And then we go to another debate.
Value does not usurp the desires of the mother if she wants to terminate it.
But see, then we get in another debate where it's like, okay, at that point, that provokes the debate of, like, is it okay to regard some human life as more valuable than others? So then we're talking about something entirely different.
Right.
I mean, that could be implied to the same situation, but it's a different subject. So, like, you want to debate that now?
Do I think that it's okay to put higher values on certain human lives?
Yeah, because I don't agree with that. And I think that's one that, like, dude, I honestly don't think hardly. That's the sort of thing that, like, Nazi Germany and groups like that ran on. Like, that's a pretty tough argument to make. I give it your best shot, but, like,
I mean, so I mostly have limited the fetuses, and then I'm going to say, well, what would prevent that from spiraling out into applying it to Asians or
So I see what you're saying by saying that's a slippery slope argument.
They can't really reach very high. They can't jump. We should just get rid of them. I see where you'd say, oh, it's how do you not prevent that kind of thing from? And there's no objective reason for why I think that should not happen. I would very subjectively say that we should stop it. And there's no real, like, concrete rationale for that. It's just an arbitrary stopping point, because I think once fetuses develop,
it's just how you feel.
Trimester, I do have problems with abortions, and prior to that, though, I don't. So that seems to be a reasonable stopping point. And after that method of, oh, they're lesser than, it's fine if we terminate them, should end.
And so, like, okay, I get that. That's what you think.
It was purely subjective. There's no concrete moral anchor in this at all.
Sure.
Purely subjective.
But see, my thing is, you got to understand that some people would take that a step further than what you believe. So, like, for example, you think first semester is okay. Or first trimester, semester, my bad. First trimester is okay. But there's some people that believe that, like, it's third trimester is totally cool. Like, if the situation comes up, that should be okay too. And so, like, how do you debate someone that third trimester is wrong? Like, how would you say that to them?
Oh, I would simply say that there are people, college getting good to you. Shut up. I would simply say that because of premature births, so I believe 24 weeks or whatever, and she came out, and I mean, if you pop it, I mean, you look at it, it's like, yeah, I guess she's small, but it's clearly you can make at that point the fetus has developed into what I would consider a baby. And there are certain, and perhaps there's scientific standards that you can apply, certain features that you can scientifically identify and determine to deduce at what point that happens.
Sure.
So, and she's still alive right now, and so that's fine. So I would say just look look at, I think there's actually a limit that they've, like, there's after a point, if they're born early,
different states,
they will not be able to survive regardless. And I think 24 actually. Cut off. I think it might be it might be earlier or later, but I believe 24 is still the cut off. Beyond that, if it's any, they will not be able to survive regardless of any kind of treatment. And so I would say that, that isn't stopping point. I would still go maybe a little bit back, but yeah, I would say we should not be aborting babies beyond that point.
Okay, so then how I would respond to that is that by saying you understand that there's some people that don't agree with you and think that third trimester is totally cool, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And it's going to be difficult for you to necessarily convince them entirely that it's not, right?
Right.
So like what I'm going to say is, if we use your logic in explaining why like some lives should be not valued as highly as others, then basically what that means is those people who do believe third trimester should be allowed, therefore like that should be totally cool given to them, using the same standards that you did and saying that like they devalue third trimester life. And then see, before when I said stuff about like, yeah, we should be able to enslave and kill whoever I want. Yeah, that's a slippery slope. Obviously, I'm exaggerating right there. Hopefully nobody's ever going to come to like that big of a problem. But like,
I mean, that would be
you agree with. That's something that reasonably, based off your logic, happen. It's like, that's not that big of a stretch based off what you've already said. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So then you can see now how like some people will use what you're using to talk about first and second trimester. And if they accept what you're saying to be correct, then theoretically third should be totally cool too.
Except when people give birth to babies in hospitals, that is in the third trimester. I mean, when they go into labor and child, that is in the third trimester. So whether that happens, then that point in there, that could happen 2 weeks early, and they will still view it in the same light. So you're still dealing with something that's not the same as, something at 36 weeks is not the same as something at the first 2 weeks. They're just not the same.
Yeah, I mean,
you can objectively,
if you look at it with like the like science behind it and the moral ankle and stuff, but like as you said before, why you said that third trimester is not okay it was what you say, subjective. So like for them, it's subjective to say that third trimester is okay too, because not everybody believes the same thing, and like that's just the way it is. Like, you know what I mean? So the problem is that like your logic can,
but you can actually show things trimester baby though, and they can observe it, and then you can show them pictures of a second week of a fetus, and there's clearly a stark difference. One, I mean, just if you showed someone a picture of a baby at 38 weeks and one at a fetus at 2 weeks, I don't see how you could come to the conclusion that that they're both on the same level. They're clearly not. And so
listen, I agree with you.
So irrelevant. I don't have a problem pulling the plug on it versus the one at 38 weeks could be born that point.
I agree with you entirely. You get that right. Like, I don't think abortion should be able to happen like at all. So like, obviously I'm more than in agreement with you about third trimester. That to me, that is beyond fucked. All I'm saying is there's some people out there that don't think like you and I do. And so like with your logic, if they were to take that and like say, for example, that your logic got somehow passed into like a law or something, right? If they were to take that same logic like you did, what they could do is then use that, manipulate that to talk about third trimester too. And then you start to see what I'm talking about, where it's like that logic can be seriously used. Not that I'm saying that you would ever do that, but I'm saying that there's some people who would use that to fuck shit up. Like, and that's not good.
All right, well, and that's why. Okay, all right, I see what you're saying. So, I mean, and that's why.
So like, what I'm saying is, your first and second trimester abortion, okay, that is okay as long as you don't grant the human life thing in the first place. You can be right, but it's not doing it the way that you're trying to do it.
First, I would say. Second, I'm not entirely sold on either. I would say absolutely first. Second, I'm not. I don't know.
Well, I misrepresented your point. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
It was I was kind of ambiguous about this, what I thought about the second trimester. I'm still not sold on abortion second trimester. Again, for purely,
that's something to think about. So I got you.
Purely subjective reasons. I think, yeah, people could then take that and apply it, but I think they could. I don't think use my rationale. And the reason I don't view a first trimester fetus as being as valuable of a human life is purely mental reasons. Whereas a third trimester baby is effectively that I would consider infanticide. So a baby so I think 40 weeks is the max. So at 39 weeks versus 1 week past it's born, they're effectively, in terms of development, the exact same. So that would be clearly infanticide. Whereas a fetus, in its most undeveloped form, has little value and little development to the point where I think you get rid of it. And so that's clearly different from a third, which I would say would decide.
I'm not.
So you would not
saying you're wrong.
Be able to take my rationale why I think the first trimester is okay. Apply it to the because they're not the same thing and they're not developed. So you could make the case perhaps, but you wouldn't be able to use the reasons I think that the acceptable to justify third trimester abortions.
I think you definitely could. I think if a baby, as soon as it is born, stuff still happens. Like there's still growth during the third trimester.
Right. I mean, yeah. But
so like the third trimester, the baby in the third trimester is not the same as a baby that's straight out of the womb. So if you want to say that,
well,
therefore
you
can value it by
the day you go into labor, you are in the third trimester. So I mean, and then it's just
for sure,
and then it's just a matter of difference of a couple of hours. So I mean, how much happens maybe 2 hours from when you go to labor and when you actually spit the thing out? I don't.
Dude, fuck if I know. I mean, I'm not. It's been a minute since I've been inside of like a biology or like human anatomy class, so I have no idea what growth exactly happens during the third trimester. But I mean, there is significant growth throughout the entire 3 trimesters of stuff that happens. So like the baby is not fully developed until it's not even, a human is not even fully developed until like 25.
Well, yeah,
you're constantly undergoing development.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, somebody could even take your argument and say that, like, until 25, the human, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, obviously that's far-fetched, but, like.
Right, I mean, yeah. So I totally get where other people might and I said out of what I originally limited it to.
Yeah, see, the thing is, people
that's not really, that's not my problem. That's not my fault if someone does that, because I was very specific about the parameters of when I set this up. So if they want to take it out of those parameters, from which I never really condone, then that's, that's not my problem. That's totally on them. And they probably would have done.
That's the world. That's the world.
They probably would have, regardless of whether I said that or not.
For sure, I'm not saying that like you would be the reason that people would be killed like that. I'm not putting that on you. You know what I mean?
Right.
But what I'm saying is like the effect of things that you like that logic can lead to and stuff like you have an effect obviously like on your town or city, your state, your count, whatever, like on the world basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like by allowing that and by seeing that other people end up making those like obviously very stupid decisions, like this is the earth that we live in. Like you should be concerned about what other people are doing to it. I mean, I guess you can say that it's not your problem and it's not your concern, but then you have to look around and be like, yeah, I live in a country where people kill people because they don't value them as being like equal based on logic that was whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I see that. And I guess ultimately at the end of this, I would just go back to my very, very initial point was that I think. So yes, you were good in observing this. I'm sort of going back and forth. I don't really believe that they are human lives, but then I sort of try and counteracted by saying that they are, but without using terminology that sort of. I just don't find fetuses specifically. It speaks nothing towards like 5 years old, 10 years old, 25 years old, 50, whatever. And I realize how some people might then take it and try to apply it to that, but I wouldn't, and that's too bad. So, I don't value the existence of a 3-week-old fetus.
No, I mean that's
basically my point. Is that I don't. It's like, okay, so is it? Well, it's a human life. I'm like, well, I guess so. It's like, well, then, so it's okay to murder? I'm like, yeah, I guess so.
But see, my thing is that like, if you by saying that you just don't really believe that it's a human life, I guess, man. Like it's just it's because
I do, and it's just fine with disposing.
You're like kind of lagging out. I didn't hear you said.
Or I do, and it's just one that I'm fine with disposing of.
But then, I mean, that just like, okay, I understand that like for you, like the first trimester and iffy second trimester, like that's accepted by a lot of people, right? And so, like, yeah, okay, like that logic can be applied to that situation, and it seems like it's gonna be okay. But the problem is, it's regardless of whether you believe it or not, it's the implications of what that can do.
Right. Okay, I can see that. Yeah.
Because it's just dangerous. I'm not saying that you are a bad person for believing that. You can, because there are a lot of people that do believe that. I mean, I don't, but like I can, if you don't value that life, and therefore I think that means that you don't think it's a life, because like, it depends on but then you say that not all lives are equal. So I don't, you know what I mean? Like there's just so many like constraints on that you have to pass through first to be able to, but if you say that all human lives are equal, but then you think that it's okay to kill a fetus after you admit that, then you don't think it's human life. So, but then you don't think that all human lives are equal. So then we have to go into that. And then we talk about, well, then at what point do human lives become equal? What makes some human lives better than others? How can we, and then it's impossible to set a curriculum or like a standard on like which lives are equal that everyone will agree with. Because then you run into the problem of people being like, well, he's black, so he's not equal or something, just stupid shit like that literally humanity has gone through like thousands of years just trying to fucking figure out and finally get people on a level playing field. And it's just so dumb, because I'm not saying that like you are racist or sexist or anything like that, but there are people out here that are like that, and they believe and will use the sort of logic that you're pushing for it to be able to get that doctrine going.
Oh, sure.
That's a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean,
so like we shouldn't promote that, because I'm not saying that you are a bad person for promoting that, and I'm not saying that like what you are doing is inherently bad, but the problem is you don't want to create a world that's like that. You know what I mean? That's just I don't feel like it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I get to see that. I mean, I would.
Like, and none of this ties back to you being a bad person.
Right, no,
I'm saying that. That's not my argument.
Yeah, got it. I mean, yeah.
See, because I think your argument is so much stronger when you say that you don't think a fetus is a baby or a human life. If you say that, then I'm like, well, fuck, the conservative rules don't apply anymore. But like, the moment that you say that it is, I don't think it's not as good.
Yes, I mean, I get where it has a lot of moral implications for them. So like exactly what you just went through about, well, then the other people and, someone's Asian, therefore they're lesser than or whatever, we can just kill them. And it can lead to like systemic racism and other things. Eugenics, whatever. Sure, possibly.
And I mean, like, neither you or I want a world where that exists.
Right. No. And so, I mean, yeah, ultimately, I don't necessarily consider early lives. But yeah, I mean, even though it does have implications outside of this initial topic, I would probably still say that I don't have a problem with killing fetuses. given all
all
the ramifications and possible problems it could cause later down the road, I still would say it's something they're human with.
I mean, I'm just saying, I don't think it's dangerous for you to say that killing fetuses is a good or a bad thing. I think what's dangerous is for you to say that not all human lives are equal.
Oh, and then, okay. So, all right. So here's the problem. So that I said all human lives were equal, and it's somewhat splitting hairs. It's more that I use the term matter, in the sense that there's this whole Black Lives Matter, or all lives matter. This is more of a nihilistic view of the world in general, and I would say some lives matter. And some don't, do me a favor real quick. Some are, in the sense that I would say in terms of significance, I'd say they're all equal in the terms of their value as humans, but some people have done significant things, and some people are, like the phrase like cogs in the machine. Like, I clearly have not done anything significant with my life. If I were to, even people across town would have zero knowledge of my existence, because I'm simply irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. People so having dinner. People are having right now, and they're having, or maybe they're like sleeping, or they're getting up or something. They have zero knowledge of my existence.
Sure. So what you're arguing is not that, like, in value that they're not equal. What you're arguing is they haven't done anything yet, so therefore they're not equal. In terms of importance, right? In terms of just like significance. So, and that's they're like, oh, Black Lives Matter. I'm like, well, no. It's like all lives matter. No, some are just irrelevant. Not in the sense that you should be valued as subhuman. They just haven't done anything relevant. No, I see what you're getting at. So I'm going to ask you one quick question because I wasn't familiar with. I'm going to have to like plead ignorance on this one. You know what I mean? But like, I'm not familiar with it. You say nihilistic was the word. I've heard of this word before, but I don't. What does that mean? I mean, so from my understanding, your argument hinges on that. My understanding of it, and I generally have heard it used in this context. I don't think I've ever actually read the definition of it. But anyways, basically, it would be that very sort of. I mean, in that sense, if I were to take it a step further and be really nihilistic about it, I would no lives matter. That because the world is destined to be destroyed at some point by a solar flare or whatever, or because we're all going to die at some point, that in the grand scheme of things, that we're all going to die, nothing matters, no lives matter. Okay. But then you run into problems of issues like religion. Right, but I mean, it is more of a. That's like an atheistic belief, basically. I mean, kind of. It's sort of. Nihilism. It's a philosophical doctrine that suggests the lack of one or more reputedly meaningful aspects of life. Okay. So yeah, which argues but you don't without objecting or purpose, intrinsic value. But that would then be everybody. So either grounds for saying some are more valued than others. So no, you're all equally worthless, and no one has real intrinsic value. Okay, but then if we're so you wouldn't be able to say I have more value than you, so I'm going to kill you because you might not think they have any intrinsic value, but neither do you. So there's no. So then why doesn't everybody kill each other? I mean, that's the problem. Like pure essential nihilism. Is that we should all just die, so it doesn't matter how. Well, yeah, that would be the. And then that comes into play with like context of doctrinism and whether or not you believe that, which is just another basis of opinion. And so then we run into another point. We can't definitively prove one or another wrong. Well, and even then you could also, I mean, it could spiral out in that, yeah, like you said, if you subscribe to that, it could also be a way of doing the exact same things. So it's, I guess in some way it could be meant to prevent anyone trying to say that they have more value than us, or that there's a certain race that's superior. But then if you just get a certain group of people to subscribe to this, even when others don't, they could say, if you subscribe to this, then
just go kill everybody, and you don't. So you could end up at the exact same thing. We have to believe in this and that, therefore everyone should just kill each other. So they're going to be the one else is going to get killed, and they'll be the ones who are better off, and they'll be left over after they kill everybody else by setting up their own group of people, which they can then reproduce through.
And then the other issue with this is this. Well, okay, it's a. Would you agree that this is a pessimistic view on life, relatively?
Extremely.
Okay, so if we're gonna vote, like, then you also have to go at the pessimistic point of view, and you have to say that, like, this fetus or whatever, whoever we're talking about, doesn't even necessarily need to be a fetus at this point. Like, it could be a young kid. Is that we're saying that, like, you are saying that at no point in this young kid, fetus, you, me, or anybody, that in the next, like, for the rest of their life, you're saying that you don't think that they will achieve anything worth anything.
I mean, if I followed through on this view, which I said like certain. So when I was describing it, I said it's nihilistic. I don't necessarily.
Because okay, let's say for example,
I said it's borderline nihilistic if you really think about it. But yes, following what you just said, yes, that would be.
Let's say for examples, because you have to. I feel like at this point we've established somewhat that, like, you kind of have to believe in this doctrinism to a certain extent to be able to say that, like, some fetuses aren't worth as much life value wise aren't worth as much as other lives. So to be able to accept this nihilistic view, I suppose, to a certain extent at some point, what you have to be able to say is that, like, let's just throw out like a scenario. This is going to be entirely fake, but I'm just throwing it in your direction. So, like, let's say for example you are I'm in college, so I'm going to throw some, like, college stuff. You're like the head of your fraternity, and you give a lot of money to, like, social clubs and stuff like that, and you have a big impact on, like, the local surrounding area. And I'm like some white nerdy kid who sits in his dorm all day, talking to people on my phone, debating, and I really don't do shit outside of that. So then, like, you at that point, based on nihilism, if you admit that people have some importance to some, if you don't go extremely nihilistic like you were saying before, that you at that point are worth more than me. But let's say, like, I'm in here studying my ass off and I'm not on my phone, and within 10 years, I create the cure for cancer. So at one point, yes, not in the nihilistic view, you are worth more than me. But at that point, according to nihilism, I'm not. That sounds really dicky saying you're worth more than someone else, but I would be worth more than you at that point. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't say you were.
So, like, I think your value changes throughout time.
Right. And again, it was never. I wouldn't say that. I would say that my life had a higher value than you, or I was worth more as a human being, or I was elevated to a higher status as you based on that. I would say if that were truly the case, and I actually could demonstrate that I had a large impact, or at least some kind of on the local community, I would say that I'm, like, I think I use the term more significant at that present state. I've been more significant. It doesn't necessarily speak that you are subhuman or I am superior to you. It just means that my life so far
it's just worth more.
Matters more in the sense that I'm doing more, but like some change.
Yeah.
In most cases, I mean, your average citizen of Earth, I typically doesn't change that significantly.
So
but
then,
yes,
like,
people do change throughout their lives.
Let's just say then, like, hypothetically, you replace me with, like, the fetus, I guess. So then, like, that fetus is the one that ends up doing, like, whatever, cure to cancer, president of the U.S., and, like, frees sex slaves from some country, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, there's no way in you definitely knowing whether or not on the nihilistic view or that scale or whatever, how important the potential for that being is to ever become.
Oh, sure.
Because we can't tell the future.
Right, but in their current state, fetus has very, very little.
Sure, no, I'm not disagreeing with that.
In its current
state. Current state, yeah.
Well, and that's where I guess I would say, like, where I would differ from in terms of placing like levels of value on different people. That's why I sort of draw the line at actual people who've been born and are alive, and why I would sort of veer against establishing that some people are inferior and therefore we go kill them all because they are born and they've established their lives. A fetus at its current state is not doing anything. It's not really, it doesn't have the abilities to, and it doesn't have the development to. It doesn't even have any features or any body parts. So at that point, that's ultimately why I'm really accepting of terminating it. Simply in its state, it has the potential to do nothing in its current state because it doesn't have the ability to.
Well, like it has
and
the ability.
Further along in the development that goes, the less and less that becomes the case. And then once it's born, obviously, then you really are not being able to make that case.
So you're not basing it on what it's done. You're basing it on the ability, like the capability of what it can do.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, but then when you, like, a fetus has the capability to become a human being.
It can.
Like the fetus. Think about it. Like the fetus. At one point, you and I were fetuses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had the capability to become who we are today.
Right.
Obviously, because we did it, you know. So like, it does have capability.
Right. And okay, so this goes to like what I've never said is that I think everyone should have an abortion. My general.
No, you didn't. I'm not saying you said that.
For why anyone should ever need an abortion, and I would limit it to the first trimester. And the only reason I would really find acceptable would be as a backup method of birth control. I'm not in the thing of, or I guess if you were raped, and as long as you do it early on, because I mean, if you were raped and then you put it off till the third trimester, what are you doing, kid? And then I guess there's always the other whatever thing. So I'd be fine with that as well. But really, the only reason I would ever think that you should need an abortion would be as a last ditch effort at birth control.
To be honest with you, and I'm still kind of, no, I'm not sketchy about it then. The only reason that I would tell you that like an abortion would ever be okay is if it endangers the mother's life and there's no chance of the kid surviving either. Because you might as well have one living person than two dead. Does that make sense?
All right, that's a fair point.
But we have different views on that, so like I don't think I can really. I can't convince you of like.
Yeah.
Because like for example, with like rape and stuff like that, I totally grieve for the mom that went through that. That's a horrible experience that I honestly wish nobody would have to go through. And like, you know what I mean? That absolutely sucks. And it would be even worse to have a kid inside of you that reminds you of that every time you have to look at him. That sounds fucking horrible. But the problem for me is that, like, first off, we go back to your nihilistic thing and say that fetus has the ability to become someone like you or me. Okay? Right. And secondly, like, it isn't the kid's, it's not the fetus's fault that it was conceived via rape. So, like, I think adoption is typically the best way to go with that. Even though adoption centers are shit and all of that, yeah.
I don't really agree with that. I mean, I would.
A lot of people make that point and say, like, adoption is horrible and foster homes suck and, like.
I mean, it can be. I mean, it's whatever. But I mean,
that's why it's stuff like.
As an option for abortion. I just think it should be left as a option, not to be literally necessarily, where you can just not use them or birth control pill and then just say, oh, well, we don't need a condom because I can just go get an abortion. Not used in that sense. In like, let's say the condom breaks, or like a real world example, you are hooking up with a really psycho bitch who like holds condoms and then pull out and it's like, what the hell?
Well, even then, like,
and they do exist.
It doesn't.
They are weird as hell.
It doesn't matter because you and I as guys, like, we can't tell girls to get abortions.
Right.
Like that's not. I don't even think that's. We have no. The woman decides ultimately if she gets it or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's.
So like, even if something like that happens, my thing is like, okay, or if contraceptives and stuff don't work and you really aren't trying to have a kid and that causes you, once again, we run into the same issue with rape where it's not your kid's fault. I understand that fucking sucks. And so the problem here isn't the fact that she has a kid. The problem here is that society has a bad view of certain pregnancies. And so what we need to combat isn't like pushing for abortion. What we need to combat is going up to people that say, oh, you're a teen and you're pregnant. Like, what a fucking slut. That's what we need to focus
on. Yeah.
It's the stigma.
No, because I do think stigma, but it's also without purpose. Like some of the most easiest ways to guarantee that you will be poor or sort of state of poverty, and one of
single motherhood,
best reasons every single time that will almost guarantee you is having a kid in your teens or in your early years when you can't afford one. And then obviously, then I guess you would answer that, well, then what? And I would also agree that you shouldn't have sex if you can't afford a kid. I don't think poor people should.
No. I wouldn't argue that. I think sex is totally cool.
I mean, I think humans are sexual beings by nature. So I mean, so he's saying, oh, well, then just don't have sex. I'm like, well, people have sex. I mean,
no, that's ridiculous.
People are going to have sex.
People not to have sex.
People are going to have sex. I personally don't think they should necessarily, but I'm not going to stop them. And if they do, that's their business, and I literally cannot stop.
Yeah, you have no right. Yeah,
I don't.
I agree with you on that. No, my response to that would actually be, I forgot what I was about to say. So I'm not saying we should tell people not to have sex or anything like that. What I'm saying is like, we should be okay with teenage pregnancy if it happens. We should not promote it. Does that make sense? So like you can't just be like, yeah, everybody should have fucking kids, especially when you're 17 or whatever, right? But like if a 17-year-old does have a kid and like she's grieving about it and stuff, you don't give people a rough time for that. That's bullshit. If a 17-year-old has a kid and she's like hype as fuck about it, then we have a problem.
Yeah. Okay, I can.
But I mean, there are also some people. Like for example, my mom was 18 when I was born, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I mean, I'm literally in my college dorm. I go to like a top university in the U.S. and stuff like that. Where like, it's not always a bad situation. Her parents definitely weren't happy about her when this happened. But like, also like, it doesn't necessarily mean bad things are gonna happen. Like people survive from stuff like that too.
Yeah.
So, and I guess I can't really talk on that because then I have like a bias thing. So I apologize if that's like a conflict.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, generally, I don't think poor people should reproduce. That's just my thing. Again, I'm not gonna
man, you can't.
That we take actions to fix. And I'm not having the government then create policies that prevents them from reproducing. But I mean, in general, I think it would be better if poor people didn't reproduce.
Oh, dude,
method of stopping them. So
that's so bad. How can you say that?
Because it's a never-ending cycle. So they're poor. Then
I understand it's a never-ending cycle, but
then
like,
they're going to remain poor. Then their kid is going to grow up poor, and they're going to be poor. So it's like, well, at some point, what's the cause?
Not necessarily.
Because poor people keep having kids. So if you stop poor people, obviously I'm not able to stop them, and I don't want to stop them. But do I think they should stop? Yes. Do I have any way of enforcing that, or do I want any way of enforcing that? No. But if they ask me, hey, do you think we should have a kid right now? I'm like, how old are you? 21. What's your net income? Well, my boyfriend doesn't, and I work part-time at, I'm like, yeah, if you want my advice, don't have sex, don't have sex.
I mean, sure,
I'm not going to kick down your door and chop off your dick if I find out that you are having sex. But if you want advice, sake and for your potential kids' sake, probably should, to oral.
Did you say limited? You're buzzing out right now. I swear to God, you just said limited to oral. Was that serious?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you must have sex and you're really poor, if you want my advice, oral and anal. But if you must go vaginal, then use a condom. Use a condom. Use a fucking condom.
Okay, I agree with what you're saying right now. way to combat this, and this is the last point I gotta make because I really gotta piss. So this is it.
All right.
So like my thing back to this would be to say, just because you're poor, that nothing in life is guaranteed. All right, we agree on that.
Oh, sure.
So,
right.
so like, just because you're poor doesn't mean that your kid is going to continue to be poor, or that's not inherently like what's going to happen. And then also,
right.
I agree, there is a problem with like the cyclical nature of poverty. But the problem isn't that like that will always happen. The problem is, oh shit, I'll be right back. All right, we'll just break later. Are you still there?
Yeah.
All right, cool. The problem, and I was thinking about this, is like a lot of the times the cyclical poverty thing, and a part that we haven't really brought into it yet, which sucks that I have to bring it into it, but a big thing is like race. So the cyclical poverty thing is a big thing that you see in the African American community, unfortunately. And so the problem is that you have, again, it's another stigma created by society where people tell people, especially like African American culture, Black culture, whatever you want to call it, that like since they are Black and there is, quote, institutional racism in the United States, they will never be able to achieve anything in life. So when they start out poor, they're like, yeah, I'm poor because I'm Black and people fucking hate me. And then they never do anything with their fucking life because they use that as an excuse. You have to eliminate that in the first place.
Oh,
so,
I completely.
That's the problem.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that.
The problem isn't that people are having kids. The problem is that the people that are having kids in poor environments are told that those kids will never achieve anything. You know what I mean? I mean, like, yes, obviously having kids while you're poor doesn't set you up for the best future, but there are definitely good things that come out of that.
I mean, I think it's kind of definitely racism thing is a huge disservice to poor Black communities, because they just get told that the reason you are unsuccessful is because somewhere out in the ether there are these existential forces down in society that they must somehow exist because you're poor. Well, that's, of course, they're not going to succeed in that kind of environment when they're told that they're being pushed down in society. It's because unknown forces are out there to get. Where at, though?
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Do you like Ben Shapiro a lot? Do you know who Ben Shapiro is?
Yeah, no, I love Ben Shapiro.
I love Ben Shapiro, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So yeah, like he goes like there's not necessarily white privilege. There's like I think he calls it like the not committing crimes privilege, and the don't have kids before you can afford them. Don't commit crimes. I mean, those are the real privileges in society. Is wait until you have a stable household before you have kids. You don't go out and commit crimes, and you don't do stupid shit. That's the privilege. And then
for sure,
there's this mentality that we try and tell minority communities to keep that society's just out to get them. Like, well, they'll never foster in that kind of an environment when that's all they're told.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so the reason that there's cyclical poverty and stuff like that isn't because of like, I mean, yes, the fact that like poor families are reproducing and like single parents and stuff like that, they definitely cause issues like that. But like, there's a correlation between that and leading to children that like poverty in the next generation in that family. Yeah. But that is not necessarily one-to-one like exactly true all the time. And by doing things like getting rid of the idea of institutionalized racism and things like that, there's a much better chance of them not being poor than, like, it's easier to get rid of that than to tell somebody, hey, you're poor, don't have sex.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. Yeah,
people are gonna have sex no matter. You can't stop that. You can try to educate them and teach them and show them what might happen, but ultimately the decision is up to them. But when it comes to a society where we have this issue of institutionalized racism that people believe exists, we can affect our own society. Like, this society involves us. That relationship, we are not part of it.
Yeah. Well, all right, dude, I gotta go. So, but yeah.
Good talk.
All right. Cool. Good talk. All right. Peace.
All right.